This is a video about Israel, and it's made to contradict two sides. Firstly, the anti-Israel people who believe that Israel is an apartheid state, they're running a genocide, and who absolve Hamas and any other terrorist organization in the area of any bad things that they've done. And secondly, I also wish to address the Israel lobby and the general Jewish community view of Israel. Firstly, to the anti-Israel view. I'm going to focus on people who accuse Israel of committing a genocide and a Holocaust and committing an apartheid state. Firstly, the definition of genocide is clear about the fact of the intent to wipe out a nation, race, religion, etc., etc., etc. If, hypothetically, Israel, with its superior weaponry, which you seem to agree with, and military ability, like, why you say it's being done, but shit, the population has grown. There's a growth. There is now 1.5 million living in Gaza when it was 1.5 million living in Palestine. Like, the numbers have grown, they haven't shrunk, birth rates are through the roof. That's not a genocide. If they wanted to really commit a genocide, they'd stop those birth rates. They'd kill children and mothers, and they'd bomb hospitals, quite openly. The thing is, they're not trying to attack civilian targets. Otherwise, why wouldn't they just do it constantly? That's the issue. If they were genuinely committing a genocide, as genocides have been done before in Rwanda and Kosovo, like in Yugoslavia, in the Holocaust itself, there would be more attacks on the civilian population. There isn't. There isn't this daily, death marches. There isn't this killing machine that is operated in Israel. There is no constant barrage of rockets against civilians. There isn't. It doesn't exist. Okay, next. The idea that Israel is the new apartheid state. A history lesson first. Apartheid was a political system in South Africa, and it was to create a separated community between coloured Africans and white Africans. Coloured Africans not just being native Africans, but also Jews, Indians, anyone that wasn't an Afrikaner, which is the Dutch Africans, or a British African. So this was when coloured Africans would have to be living in Bantustans and were forbidden to live in white areas. They had to get special passes to go into white areas, and they certainly had no higher job than working. There was also legislation on how many coloured Africans you could have in your workplace. Israel is not quite like this. There are mixes of Arab Israelis, there are Arabs living in Israeli cities, there are Muslims living in Israeli cities, there are Christians living in Israeli cities. This isn't an apartheid state. There are some elements where certain villages, communities, certain groups of people wish to segregate themselves from the main street and separate themselves from general living, and they live by themselves. There are several Arab villages which continue to do this. But this isn't the same thing as an apartheid. This is not an apartheid. Secondly, to the Jewish lobby and to the Israel lobby in itself. My issue is the undemocratic attitude taken to anyone who attacks or criticizes the state of Israel. The right to criticize is a democratic right, and Israel does not really protect that. And I can give you an example. The fact that people who don't want to enter the army, I'm sorry for rambling, either have to be mentally impaired, religious, or they get thrown in jail. That doesn't sound very tempting. That just isn't democracy. You should be able to have the right to say, sorry, I ideologically object to going into the army. Sure, it can affect their standings and whatever, but throwing them in jail is a bit extreme. It's undemocratic. Another thing that is huge in the Israel lobby and the Jewish communities is the belief in the infallibility of Israel. The belief that Israel is perfect and has never done anything wrong. Well, really? How about the militarization of the State of Israel? How about the unfortunate victims of the Israeli counterattacks? I'm not declaring Israel an evil entity and that it should be removed and taken down, but to suggest Israel has done nothing wrong is just as ridiculous. The idea of conversation and negotiation and discussion starts with the admission of some guilt. I'm not saying Israel is the complete essence of wrongdoing, but there is a part guilt in the continuation of this conflict that a lot of extremists, both within Israel and within the fundamentalist Arab and left communities, don't see, is that they don't take on any of the guilt of their actions. Often Islamic fundamentalists absolve Hamas and other Islamic terrorist organizations of doing nothing wrong. This is ridiculous. You're firing rockets at civilians and you're telling me you're doing nothing wrong? It's all in the nature of Islam? Then doesn't that make your Islamic interpretation just a little bit bullshit? Because then wouldn't that mean that Israel could kill your civilians? No, because the killing of civilians is wrong. Not a war crime, but wrong. And Israel and the Jewish communities and everyone needs to accept part of that guilt so we can take the first step towards peace. And this is where I end my video. Thank you very much and good night.